I noticed that some of you are still coming on. And so it's great to have everybody here tonight. And I think we're going to end up with about 17 people. So you guys are in for a real treat tonight. So I guess we'll go ahead and get started as people continues to join us. But tonight we've got a wonderful guest speaker. So let me tell you just a little bit about her. If you could pop that screen up.
Yes.
So we've got Diane Dreher here tonight, and Diane, as you guys, many of you probably know, she's a part of our community here, and she's a professional certified coach, as you can see, a HeartMath certified practitioner. She's a university professor at Santa Clara University. She writes blogs for Psychology Today, and she's written 7 books. Including this bestseller, The Tao of Inner Peace. You know, I've known Diane for several years now, and what I love most about Diane is that she is one of the kindest, compassionate, empathetic people that I personally know. And she's also this person that has incredible integrity and wisdom. And she, if you're looking for a life coach, or you know anybody that is looking for a life coach, she's your person as well. I mean, she is just this incredible individual, and I'm so glad to that she is going to be our guest speaker tonight. And I'm thankful for all of you tonight that you're here, and each and every one of you. We have so many outstanding people in this group, and so I'm going to turn it over to Diane, and she's got some good stuff for us tonight, I know. So go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much, Rick. I'm glad to be here for tonight's session, and the session is moving from stress to greater clarity, compassion, and creativity. And where we're going today is we're going to look at last month's challenge. Then we're going to look at stress and reactive decision making, moving from reactive to creative. And I love these words because reactive and creative look almost like the same word, except that there's the difference of where the C is. Okay, you move the C over here and then it becomes creative. So we're going to move ourselves by what we see and what we can recognize from being reactive to creative. We'll be looking at the Taoist wisdom of yin and yang. How does that fit? I hope you'll find out. We'll have a group breakout discussion and then a conclusion. So here we go. First of all, the May monthly challenge. Last month, Rick showed us how to increase our intuition. And I, for one, noticed how my intuition increases when I'm more coherent, when I don't have a lot of static in my brain and in my body. You know, I can receive much more intuitive guidance. I can come up with more clarity. And so we were to find a moment each day to take 5 minutes to just be fully present, to practice heart-brain coherence, and then note whether these times really have an impact on our intuition and how. So I'd like to thank Rick for giving us that wisdom last month, and encourage all of us to continue doing this process. Okay, so tonight we have stress and reactive decision making. And as we know, kind of personally, when we're stressed, we're not at our best. And stress shuts down our higher powers, our higher ability to function. And to understand just how stress blocks compassion, even when people have the best intentions, let's go back to the classic Princeton Theological Seminary experiment, which never fails to amaze me. On a cold day in December in 1972, 2 psychologists decided that they were going to do this study. So they asked 47 ministerial students to give an impromptu recorded talk in the lab next door. And as some of us realize, fear of public speaking is a major stressor. I don't know about some of your students, but I know some of my students find it very scary to speak in front of class. So this was not only public speaking, it was going to be recorded and it was impromptu. They didn't have much time to prepare. It's already stressful. And some students were told to talk about their future careers in the ministry, and others were going to talk about the parable of the Good Samaritan. And again, they all knew this parable. So each student was given directions to the lab in the building next door. But, and here's the difference, the researcher met with each student individually, and to some of the students, he just said, okay, go outside, through the alleyway, up the steps, etc. To another group of students, one at a time, he looked at his watch and said, oh, you're already running late. You're going to have to hurry. Okay, so one at a time, the ministerial students passed through the alley on the way to the building, where they saw a young man, this is part of the experiment, slumped in a doorway, coughing and groaning. And if the student stopped and asked if he was okay, the victim coughed and said he had a respiratory condition and he'd taken his medicine and he just sort of needed to rest and he didn't really feel very well. And if the student insisted on taking him inside, because after all, this was December in New Jersey and it's cold, the victim would go inside and then thank the student. So, looking at the results, they were absolutely remarkable. It didn't matter whether the ministerial students were going to give a talk about their future careers or the Good Samaritan. What did matter was if they thought they were running late and they were in a hurry. When they were running late, they were significantly less willing to stop and help this victim in distress. 90% of the people who were in a hurry just kept going. In fact, the researchers wrote in their study that on several occasions, a seminary student going to give his talk on the Good Samaritan literally stepped over the victim as he hurried on his way. Now, I think that's quite ironic considering, okay? So why does this happen? And it's not just in New Jersey. What happens is that our body reacts to stress with fear, perceiving a threat to our survival. We get all, keyed up. And neuroscientist Joe Ledoux has found that we have two brain pathways for processing information, the high road and the low road, he calls them. So with the high road, if we see something, we take in the information through our visual cortex goes to the thalamus, which is the brain's relay station. And then it goes to the cerebral cortex and we think about it before we send a message to the amygdala to get us into action. That's great. The amygdala is a small almond-shaped region that generates an emotional response. But that's what happens when we think about the stimulus. What happens when we feel threatened is that the stimulus goes, in this case, a snake, into the visual, the eyes, up to the thalamus, and it sends it right down to the amygdala immediately, taking the low road, giving us no time to think about the thing at all. So it activates the stress reaction with a rush of fear, anxiety, or anger, fight or flight, boom. And if we're walking in the woods and see what looks like a snake in front of us, jumping out of the way is probably a good thing. It's a survival mechanism. It's adaptive. We all have it. And if we jump out of the way, and even if it's just a twisted branch that we see, it's really no harm done because it's protecting us. We get out of the way without taking time to think. If we acted like Hamlet and sat there, to be or not to be, that is the question. The snake might bite us, so we don't want to go too cerebral when we're threatened. But all too often, our survival instinct works against us, throwing us into chronic stress. So Here we have another slide from Joe Ledoux. This is his wonderful book, actually, The Emotional Brain. So we can become reactive from a current stressor, a loud noise, an incident, who knows, or a triggered trauma, which a lot of you know a lot about because you deal with young children who have triggered traumas, and they immediately, it's like PTSD, right? The trauma becomes overwhelming. We can also become reactive from chronic stress, which is a way of life for many people in this country. So chronic stress, not a healthy situation. Research has shown that it impairs our judgment, impairs our decision-making and relationships. It can also undermine our health, bring on panic attacks, anxiety disorders, depression, headaches, insomnia, obesity, chronic fatigue, allergies, gastrointestinal problems, skin disorder, dementia, and a long list of addictive behaviors. Chronic stress really undermines our personal balance and well-being. And what happens is this: when the amygdala senses danger, it sends a message to the hypothalamus, which signals the pituitary gland to tell the adrenal glands to release cortisol. So it's a big chain reaction. And high blood levels of cortisol can cause chronic anxiety, which makes us even more readily triggered into a new fear reaction because we're already on edge from all that cortisol. It also damages our hippocampus, which is the part of the brain that stores long-term memories. And that kind of messes us up because it makes us forget essential information, even the names and faces of the people around us, because we're so stressed. It can also, too much cortisol can impair our decision-making and flexible planning by damaging the prefrontal cortex. So too much cortisol is really awful. Bad for our health, bad for our relationships. And, yes, okay. Stress can, I'm putting this slide on because I was getting stressed by all those things that excessive cortisol does. Stress can block compassion by undermining our perception, right? We can't see, hear, and empathize with and understand the people around us if we're just totally stressed out. It can trigger defensive reactions and resistance whenever someone disagrees with us. We become defensive. Or when somebody does something unexpected, that can trigger that reaction. It can weaken our cognitive ability, so we can't recognize patterns of cause and effect, engage in long-range planning, or see the larger implications of our actions. So ultimately, chronic stress can sabotage our relationships with ourselves and one another. So just thinking about all this may be stressful, so which is why I changed the slide. Okay. However, the HeartMath Institute has found that we can stop the stress reaction and return to a more balanced, coherent state with attitude breathing. And you have a handout for attitude breathing on the, let's see, on the part of, let's see, it's there on the side and with a little link that Charlotte has put up for you, and it's going to be available. Again, this is from the HeartMath Institute, but we're going to experience a little bit of heart-centered attitude breathing right now, just in case all of this talk about stress has stressed us all out. So you may want to close your eyes during this brief practice and take a deep breath. Release it slowly and notice what you've been feeling. Anxiety, worry, stress, impatience, frustration, concern about something or someone in your life, or another depleting emotional attitude. Just feeling overwhelmed, perhaps, feeling like there's too much to do. So recognize the depleting emotion and then choose a replacement attitude, which could be calm, ease, gratitude, appreciation of something or someone. So the first step to stop and notice what might be stressing us, what we're feeling, and then choose that replacement attitude. The next step is to breathe slowly and deeply into the area of your heart. And if you'd like, you can put your hand on your heart. And breathe in the renewing attitude you just chose into your heart. And feel the subtle shift of energies. Take a few moments now to do this. Relax your shoulders, focus on your heart. Breathe in slowly, breathe out slowly, and smile as you connect with that renewing emotion. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back to your room, wherever you are, and the virtual room that we share together. And again, the attitude breathing handout is in the chat on a link provided to us, thanks to Charlotte, so that you can take this and practice it as you will. Research has shown that attitude breathing helps us face our challenges with greater coherence, greater compassion for ourselves and others, greater clarity and creativity. And I don't know about you, but I feel a whole lot more coherent just after that brief practice. So in addition, we can transcend something that our culture has far too much of, the limiting false dilemma. A false dilemma, it's everywhere. It's a common dysfunction in our culture when we fall into the logical fallacy of seeing any challenging situation with only two alternatives. Either or, win or lose, all or nothing, right or wrong, us or them, just two options, which is terribly limiting because we live in a multi-dimensional universe. And we have 17 people here tonight in our webinar. And I would imagine that we'd expect more than two opinions on anything because we have a wealth of possibilities among us. But how often do you hear people say, let's look at both sides of the issue, as if there are only two, which is really sad. Great limiting of our creativity. Creativity is limitless. So that's going to be one of our challenges from tonight, to get from that reactive low road state that limits our ability to see things clearly and to think clearly, cuts off the cerebral cortex, just reacts, fight or flight, to really embracing a creative way of exploring our reality and dealing with our challenges. Now we have the ancient wisdom of the Tao Te Ching, which I've studied for a while. 25 centuries ago in ancient China, Lao Tzu wrote the Tao Te Ching, inspired during something called the Warring States period in ancient China. And during the Warring States period, he went out into nature to try to find probably solace, relief from all this conflict. And he became inspired by the fact that nature involves living systems which resolve opposites, yin and yang, the two sides, as you see, of this larger whole. And one quote from the Tao Te Ching tells us that when some are called beautiful, the rest are seen as ugly, when we fall into this false dilemma of either or. When we prize one quality as good, the rest becomes inferior. Yet each extreme complements the other, large and small, light and dark, short and tall, beginnings and endings bring balance to life. So you now have a challenge before you for your breakout groups. Ah, I've got a challenge here too. Yay, okay. Now, the breakout groups, you can take a screenshot or a picture with your phone, or simply write down really quickly question number 1 and question number 2 as I'm explaining what you're going to be doing with them. To find a larger whole for each of the 2 pairs. So you've got dark and light, earth and sky, open and closed, active and contemplative, listening and speaking. So in your group, you can brainstorm and see how many, take each pair and look for the larger whole. See how many you can find. If, for example, one of the pairs would be black and white, I could say a zebra, a black and white photograph, a newspaper, or my 2 friends, one of whom is black and one of whom is white, and they are very much in love and married to each other. So I would think of these 2 people, of their family. Dark and light, earth and sky, open and closed, active and contemplative, listening and speaking. What is a larger whole that encompasses these 2 supposed opposites? And then, after you've exercised your hearts, minds, and creativity with this, to shift to question number 2 and identify a conflict in your life, work, or current events, and find a larger whole that includes both parts. You can do this with one person's issue or multiple issues, whatever comes up in your group. And you can do it with a current conflict at work or in your life, or something that you see happening on the news that, just expand to see the larger whole. That is your challenge. So are there any questions before you go into this? And if you have a question, you can just unmute yourself and ask it, because that's probably the best way to get these things across. Well, I'm to assume that either everybody is totally confused or we have reached absolute clarity, and you now know that you are to find a larger whole for each of these 5 pairs and identify a current conflict and find a larger whole that includes both parts. So, all right, we're sending you out, and you will have about 15 minutes to, okay, welcome back. And this is one of my favorite times because I'm curious about what came up for you in your groups. So who would like to share just what came up about the 5 pairs? What did you find?
We found that some of the pairs were easier than others. to talk about the whole, and we had different perspectives on that. And but then we really dug into question two, and really talked about the situation in the world and how that reflects the idea of simple black and white versus more complexity of reality.
Wow. Yes, absolutely. It shows the global. So,
After we went through the personal parts kind of thing, we ended up ending our discussion and talking about the good and the bad of the pandemic and what were the good things that came out of that and what did we learn from that and how were we able to do certain things. So it actually worked out really well with, with finally thinking, well, we have to get our brains trained that when we do something negative, we have to take the time to find the positive too. So, because that's what's going to get us where we need to go.
mhm. In fact, I've been having conversations with people about some of the advantages that we've inadvertently gotten from having to work remotely. I mean, the disadvantage is that we can't really see people, but I have students in my class who were all over the place. I mean, all over the country, not just in one classroom at Santa Clara University. One student is in the Philippines, another is in Shanghai, some are in Massachusetts, some are in California, and yet we're all together in this shared space. And there may be a way that we can use some of the virtual tools that we've assembled during the pandemic to help bring us together, afterward. Take some of the advantages and leave some of the other stuff behind us. Beautiful insight. I was meditating on some of these pairs and, earth and sky. Well, that's easy, right? That's the landscape. And any landscape picture. But then I thought of, okay, earth and sky, that beautiful blue planet, vision of Earth from outer space. And that just stopped me. I thought, oh my gosh, a deep reverence for the planet that we call home. Someone else, what came up for you in your group?
The first activity we went through, I just started rambling on what I thought of scenarios from in between, and our group member gave me like an aha moment of, hey, let's think more concrete and come up with one word that kind of describes both the polar opposites. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Could you give us an example of one of the ones that you came up with?
Yeah, we started talking about, my group helped me out here. We were talking about the earth and the sky. And I was just like, oh, that's like, we share that land and look at that sky. And then we're like, when I got the aha moment, I'm like, well, that we could say, like you said, landscape. I said, that's everybody's environment, right? So environment.
Oh,
So that, yeah.
Yeah, the environment, absolutely. Which we all share. And it's not a question of either or. Better not be. Thank
Right.
you.
Thank you.
Another group, what came up for you all? We're now going to have a moment of silence while I look at Josephine's beautiful dog picture there.
Well, Diane, I wasn't in a group, but I was thinking about the listening and speaking.
Mhm.
Listening and speaking, and I was thinking about to really be able to understand someone before you respond to them is so important, right? And oftentimes what we don't do is we don't really listen fully to others, and because of that, we speak things without really understanding what the other person is telling us, don't we?
Yeah,
And
Absolutely.
so I see these two as being, together. You have to be able to really listen with an intent to really understand the underlying, not just what the words the individual is saying oftentimes, but what is the real meaning of what they're conveying. And to do that, you have to really listen to be able to, before you speak back to them, to summarize what they said.
That's communication, real communication. It's not either or, if I just talk all the time, I'm not going to really communicate with someone. And yeah.
Yeah, Maria, exactly. That's Stephen Covey. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great.
We also talked about the fact that the communication, the speaking and listening, the auditory part is only part of it. It's all the nuance of body language and
Yeah.
expression and all of those. And that all goes into that holistic communication.
Exactly. So another polarity, Descartes' error would be body and mind. Yeah. Which actually there's a book called Descartes' Error, because it's not an either or. We all have bodies and we all have minds, and we communicate holistically.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's one of the disadvantages of remote, is that it's harder to see nonverbals. And it's a challenge really to connect to people. And people get exhausted by too much Zoom because of that fact. But this is where we are. There are advantages and disadvantages to remote learning and remote dialogues. Something else I am curious about, a conflict in your life, work, or current events. Paul's group came up with the conflicts globally. Any other conflicts that you seem to, some group found a larger hole there? That's a real challenge.
Sadly, I'm not sure if you're willing to share out or not, because it was, kind of a personal thing. So I found that the first exercise helped me to start thinking in a way that allowed me to think of the conflict in the second exercise in a
Mhm.
more open way, where I could see that it's easy to go into your own life experience and have your thought process really limit what you think of as your opportunities. And so that you end up in that dichotomous thinking.
Mhm.
And once you can shake free of that, that's when you can say, well, things didn't quite go the way I had planned, but maybe there's another path. Like, here's where I want to go, and that's not working, but maybe there's another way to get there. Instead of just feeling like, no, that didn't happen and now I'm stuck, you can think of here's these other possibilities, and how do I start forging these pathways that I can see as possible ways to eventually get to this place I want to go to. So it was interesting to look at how those two exercises helped me, starting with that easier one and then applying it in a more real way that has a more personal value.
Wow, thank you, Linnell. That's beautiful. What you were just talking about has been identified by Rick Snyder and a group of positive psychologists as hope. That hope involves goals, pathways, and agency. And a lot of times when people try one path and it doesn't work, they just figure, okay, all or nothing, win or lose, I quit. Instead of realizing that there may be more than one pathway to get to the destination, and to open up to that. And when we're stressed, it's very hard to open up to seeing more clearly that there are new pathways because of the way our brain works, and that we're just going straight to the amygdala and feeling stressed, and we can't, connect to the higher regions there. So you are right on target with a lot of the latest research in positive psychology on goals, pathways, and agency, which I think all of us need to be on track with in order to stop falling into the pit of the false dilemma. I have an old friend, Dudley Weeks, who is an international conflict resolution facilitator. And he used to deal with interpersonal and also international conflicts. He'd go to places like Northern Ireland and the former Soviet Union, and yeah, when people were really polarized, and he'd get them to, again, do some kind of brief exercise to try to get them out of the fight or flight, and then say, okay, what are your needs, and what are the other groups or the other person's needs, and what are our shared needs? What common ground do we share that we can build on? And it's simple, but not easy to get to that. At one point, Dudley was working with an inner city neighborhood, and he had, there was conflict in the streets, et cetera, gang wars, the merchants were concerned, the local homeowners were concerned. So they all came together, and he asked them, what are your needs, and what shared needs do you think your community has? And they figured, hey, we don't have anything in common with those people, but they did. They all felt like their streets would be safer with street lights. The merchants felt people would come downtown and they would come to their shops. The homeowners felt that, they could go downtown and feel safe. And even the teenage gangs felt that they would be safer because it was hard to tell their friends from the gang from the other territory because it was so darn dark. So they all got together, made a petition, gave it to the city council, and they got street lights and they celebrated together. And that started them to building a community center together and a community health clinic together. And they realized they did indeed have shared needs. But as long as they were going at it like this, they couldn't see them. So there's a lot of wisdom in finding the larger whole that unites us all. Thank you. That is beautiful, actually. I have one more share that I'd like to put up here. Let's see. At least I think I do. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So, well, it's taken me a while to get to this, but here is our June monthly challenge. So our challenge for when we're feeling stress is to first of all recognize when we're feeling stressed, and then take a moment to practice attitude breathing. And to do this, we don't need to close our eyes if we're in the middle of some conflict. We can just, slow down our breathing. Dudley used to do something similar before he went into any conflict resolution. And then notice the opposites around you and look for the larger whole that includes them. Practice seeing the larger whole that includes us all. And we all have that common ground. It's called planet Earth. It is the home that we live in, and the home that we share. So we obviously do have that. So to recognize when you're feeling stressed, practice attitude breathing, and then practice looking around and seeing if you can find the larger whole that includes us all. So enough of that. I will stop the share.
Well, thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Diane.
Just thank you for all that you've shared, and thank you for being present. And let's see. Bradley has a question for us. What's the difference between freeze frame and attitude breathing? they both involve that heart-focused breathing that puts us back into a coherent state. And thank you, Shannon. Peace.
Yes, thank you, Shannon.
The freeze frame is when we're in the middle of something, that we can freeze it and then go get coherent and then go back to it in a more balanced frame of mind. But I see a lot of overlap in a lot of these heart math techniques because they all involve essentially heart focused breathing to get coherent. And then, we can apply them in different spaces. Rick, do you have anything further to add on that one?
Okay, all right. Well, I see it's almost 6 o'clock. Thank you so much, Diane. This was wonderful. And it made me think of the fact that, when Doris and I started this idea of having this connected community, it was about the idea that we as a group could create more compassion, more care for each other, more ideas. And we have all of these brilliant people that are here tonight and are in our group. And what we were really looking for was that larger gestalt, that exactly what you were talking about, bringing more and more people together for connection during this time, and creating more creativity and connection with each other. And I think that has really happened. And I'm so thankful for all of you in the group and those of you that weren't able to attend as well. So we just really, Doris and I both really appreciate you guys. And thank you so much for being here tonight. I hope that this was something that you really enjoyed and was helpful as well. It was for me. It made me do a lot of thinking about a lot of different things. So it was awesome.
Thank you. It was my pleasure to be here, and I really value being part of this beautiful, creative, connected group. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Diane. Well, we're going to have so be ready. We're going to have other guest speakers as well. We've got a lot of people from different walks of life, different professions in this group. And so if you get a call from me, you have a choice, either answer or don't answer. It's like, take
That's a false dilemma.
Well, I'm hoping you'll answer, and regardless of what the question is, no false dilemmas here. But I just want to, Doris and I both want to thank all of you guys, and thank you so much for being here. And we hope to see you next month, at the first of the month. And take care, everybody. And